Good evening. My name is Charles Sindel. I'm chairperson of the Webster Groves Plan Commission. We are a 9-member board of citizens appointed by the city council to review development proposals and make recommendations to the city council regarding future development of the city. In addition to the members of the Plan Commission participating in person, I think everybody's in person, right?
We're missing one member, but who will not be attending at all this evening.
We have a few other representatives of the city I would like to introduce. Our council member Pam Bliss, City Attorney Neil Brunschweiger, Planning and Development Director Mara Perry, Planner Danny Gendusa, and Denise Bolesky is our recording secretary. I would like to welcome you all to tonight's monthly meeting of the commission and take this opportunity to explain how we operate. As indicated in our agenda, we will begin with the regular session of the meeting when we will hear new applications for rezoning or subdivisions. We will hear a staff report and the applicant will explain the proposal. We will then ask for comments from the public. At that time, anyone with an interest in the proposal may indicate to city staff that they have a question or would like to express their opinion by clicking the raise hand feature on Zoom. To make sure that we accurately record your name, we ask that you identify your full name and address at the beginning of your comment. When you make your comments, we ask that you are as concise as possible and not repeat a point made by a previous speaker. We also ask that you limit your comments to 3 minutes. One person who is a spokesperson for an organization may have 6 minutes to comment. After all citizens have spoken, the applicant will be asked to respond to any questions that have been raised during the hearing. When we have finished reviewing one proposal, we will move on to the next application. Comments concerning items not on the agenda should be made during the public comments section of the agenda near the beginning of the meeting. When we have completed the regular portion of the agenda, we will go into executive session. At that time, the commission will discuss the proposal and may decide to vote on the application or to postpone the decision. You are welcome to remain and listen to the discussion, but there'll be no additional opportunity for public comment at that time. Our recommendations are sent to the city council. In most cases, the city council will conduct a similar hearing and must enact an ordinance before the proposal is finally approved. If the Plan Commission takes a vote tonight, the City Council will likely take up this issue at its first meeting next month. If you want information regarding our vote or the progress of the application, you may contact staff at City Hall. I'd ask the Secretary to read the first item on the agenda.
Approval of minutes, September 13, 2021.
Are there any comments or motions concerning the minutes of that meeting? The motion?
Motion to approve. Second.
Been moved and seconded to approve the minutes of the September 13th, 2021 meeting. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
Charlie, I'm going to do a quick reminder for those of you that did make your motion. Please really go into the microphone.
Oh.
We won't be able to hear it both on the recording, and in addition, it won't pick up for the the closed captioning.
Description.
Oh, okay.
So I could not hear either of you through your microphones when you both made the motion for the minutes.
Okay.
All right. And now next item, please.
Item 3, public comment.
This is an opportunity for members of the public to make comments on items that are not on the agenda. Is there anybody here who wants to make a comment to us? I don't see anybody. Next item.
Next item, public hearing. 21 PC 08 55 West Moody, an application by Sunshine Peak LLC for change of zoning from D Commercial District to PC Planned Commercial District on an approximately 1.3 acre tract of land located at the following addresses: 55 West Moody Avenue and 34 North Gore Avenue.
Who's going to present? I will. Dan?
Okay, so the applicant is requesting a change of zoning to a PC Planned Commercial District at 55 West Moody and 34 North Gore in the northeast corner of the Old Webster District. The subject properties are currently zoned D Commercial District. The applicant is looking to rezone the properties in order to incorporate a three-story multifamily residential building at 55 West Moody, as well as limited commercial uses at 34 North Gore, an accessory parking lot at 55 West Moody, and a drive-through ATM station at 55 West Moody. All of the uses, except for the drive-through ATM station, are already permitted uses within the D district. So mostly the intent of the change of zoning is to allow for the drive-through ATM station. The subject property, as I said, is located in Old Webster District. Surrounding it are various office, restaurants, retail uses, a couple of bank-related properties, elementary school and place of worship, and different surface parking and structured parking lots. To the north of the subject properties directly is the Union Pacific Railroad. The applicant actually owns 55 West Moody, 34 North Gore, and to the southeast, the bank property at the corner of North Gore and West Lockwood Avenue. So the accessory parking facilities are in part to serve the various properties that the tenant owns at 34 North Gore and 75 West Lockwood. Going through a brief history of the property, the subject properties were zoned E Industrial District from 1923 to 1983. The existing office building at 34 North Gore was built in the late 19th century. The existing drive-through bank teller structure at 55 West Moody was built in 1973. At that point, the properties were zoned E Industrial, which has very lax zoning regulations. So the drive-through teller structure was a permitted use at that time. Then in 1983, the subject properties were rezoned to D Commercial District, and the existing bank teller drive-through stations were deemed a legal nonconformity. They were built when that type of use was allowed. When it switched to D Commercial District, it was no longer allowed, but they could remain in place as long as they were not structurally altered or expanded, and as long as they did not remain vacant for a period more than 12 months. So then the bank teller structures were in use with ATMs at least through September 2019. In September 2019, the Bank of America at 75 West Lockwood closed their business license with the city of Webster Groves, which triggered the loss of their legal nonconforming status and use of the teller structure. So the applicant is looking to have a new bank tenant at 75 West Lockwood and would like to incorporate a new drive-through ATM station on this property, surrounded by mixed-use development of various commercial and residential uses. We have photos of the existing two-story commercial building at 34 North Gore that the applicant is not looking to alter, but will be incorporated within the PC Plan Commercial District for limited commercial uses, and photos of the existing teller structure that will be demolished as viewed from West Moody from the southeast and southwest. The comprehensive plan, the 1978 and 2017 comprehensive plan identified that the general objective of the city is the development and maintenance of a residential community, and in service of that objective is maintaining the quality and success of the city's commercial districts. In 2017, the comprehensive plan map was updated to identify recommend mixed uses in the Old Webster District, including the subject properties. And staff has identified that the proposed uses would be in conformity with the comprehensive plan recommendations. Zoning to a PC Plan Commercial District allows for integrated mixed-use districts. Districts are to be developed according to a development plan that is referred to the City Plan Commission for study, public hearing, and approval. After approval from the City Council, the applicant would come forward with a final development plan to match the regulations that you put in place and that you recommend to the city council to put in place. And at that point, some of more of these specifics would be laid out. At this point, the applicant has requested a number of uses for the subject properties, including 17 dwelling units in a multifamily dwelling structure at 55 North, or I'm sorry, 55 West Moody, as well as accessory parking lot and various limited commercial uses, which would have a limited parking impact, similar to what is currently operating in these locations. Staff recommends requiring, and in addition to what the applicant has stated, that they would like to have 17 dwelling units at 55 West Moody, but they may want the option to explore limited commercial uses at 55 West Moody if they find the market would satisfy. So if the applicant did want to incorporate some commercial into their building at 55 West Moody, staff would recommend requiring that to be limited to the first floor in interest of maintaining various manageable parking ratios, and establish a maximum of 5,000 square feet that could be dedicated to commercial uses at 55 West Moody. If the applicant incorporated commercial, we would seek a reduction of 2 dwelling units from the maximum 17 for every 1,000 square feet of commercial use that they would add in the new structure. The city code utilizes various elements such as setbacks, height, and intensity of use to regulate the dimensional aspects of development. Staff would recommend maintaining the existing D commercial district regulations on setbacks and yard projections at 34 North Gore, maintaining the existing D commercial district regulations for side yard and rear yard at 55 West Moody, which does not require a minimum setback unless, except for a 5-foot setback if you are not building to a 0 lot line. The D commercial district does allow for, does require buildings to be set back no more than 10 feet from a front property line. However, staff working with the park superintendent did identify it would be highly desired to establish street trees along this stretch of West Moody, where the sidewalks and street are very narrow, make it difficult to do planters in the sidewalk like in the rest of Old Webster. So we did desire to make sure that there could be a yard that could provide space for planting street tree canopy. So if the applicant did want to incorporate front balconies, we would allow them to set the building back an additional 5 feet with 5 feet projecting balconies. If they did not want to have the balconies, though, we would still want them to build the building to 10 feet, no more than 10 feet and no less than 10 feet from the front property line. Staff would recommend maintaining the existing D commercial district regulations on height, which allow for a maximum height of 4 feet and 56 feet. I'm sorry, 4 stories and 56 feet. But to establish the desired massing and scale in Old Webster, we would also recommend setting a minimum allowable building height of 2 stories for any new development at 55 West Moody. There's a few different elements of measuring intensity of use, looking at lot coverage, floor area ratio, and minimum land area per dwelling unit for multiple family dwelling type developments. The applicant's very preliminary conceptual site plan has identified that the lot coverage would be approximately 34%, that the floor area ratio would be approximately 0.86, and that there would be a minimum land area exceeding 2,000 square feet per dwelling unit. The D commercial district does not set any exact standards for lot coverage and floor area ratio or minimum land area. But in the interest of, again, maintaining adequate parking and parking ratio, staff did have recommendations of setting a maximum lot coverage of 40% for the entire PC Plan Commercial District, setting a maximum floor area ratio of 1. We did not recommend setting a minimum land area per dwelling unit, but also, again, setting a maximum of 5,000 square feet commercial for any first floor commercial uses at Moody. Currently, the various parking lots and facilities at 55 West Moody provide 54 off-street surface parking spaces. And there's 14 additional off-street parking spaces that the applicant owns across the street on West Moody that serve the commercial tenants at 34 North Gore and 75 West Moody. The applicant has stated that 34 of those parking spaces are currently leased by the tenants, but that historically their peak has been a lease of up to 46. The applicant would be seeking to, even with the new development, would be seeking to maintain those parking relationship with the other buildings. So it was important to staff in analyzing the proposed development to ensure that the added intensity of the development could still provide parking for the various office and commercial uses around. So the applicant will be, in their preliminary development plan, have shown that they would be providing 72 off-street parking spaces at 55 West Moody, including 40 surface parking spaces and 32 structured parking spaces in a parking garage within the structure. And they would also maintain the existing 14 off-street spaces across the street. So there would be a total of 86 off-street parking spaces for uses among the various tenants and properties they own. Looking at the parking standards within the code of 1.5 spaces per dwelling unit and generally 1 space for every 300 square feet of commercial, it would, with this full combination of uses, would require 98 spaces. The applicant has submitted a parking study to request a parking reduction of approximately 12 spaces or 12%, identifying the availability or the high propensity of common space that's in the existing commercial buildings, the low rate of parking leases they've historically had between their various commercial buildings, the potential for shared parking between the office users during the day and the multifamily, the residents at night, kind of complement each other. And they would also provide additional bicycle parking to offset some of the needed vehicle parking spaces. With that, with the review of all the various factors, staff would recommend setting a maximum parking reduction of up to 20% of the limit that would be identified based on the uses they would submit with the final development plan, determining whether they would in fact be incorporating commercial development into the new building and how many dwelling units they would be adding. But we would set that there'd be no more than 20% reduction from that total in the end. The applicant's development plan would significantly modify the access and circulation on the subject properties. Currently, it's kind of a mess. The entire frontage of 55 West Moody is a curb cut currently. So the applicant would be establishing a new street curb along most of the frontage with a single curb cut on the west side of the property that would serve for ingress and egress to the various parking facilities and also to a one-way drive-through ATM station on the west side of the building. It was staff identified that, we did have some questions about various turning radiuses at this point and whether there would be adequate clearance to get to underground parking. We wanted to just at this point understand that these are concepts or very conceptual renderings and verify that the building code and various parking codes would be needed to be met during the final development plan and building permit review stages. In addition to concerns about turning radius, the Public Works did identify that they would want a new 6-inch parking curb, or I'm sorry, a new 6-inch street curb along the frontage of West Moody. They wanted to verify that there would be adequate striping or signage added to ensure that cars didn't pull in the wrong direction into the ATM drive aisle. And staff also wanted to recommend incorporating a sort of an emergency exit lane on the side of the ATM station in case there was any sort of emergency that a vehicle needed to pull out of the queue, that there was an adequate 8-foot lane space on the outside of the ATM lane. At this point, the applicant did not provide, we did not require them to provide a landscaping plan and tree preservation plan. There currently aren't any trees on the site, but we did go over some of the basic requirements they would be needing to meet in terms of meeting certain landscaping buffers around the parking lot, providing street trees and a various amount of landscaping based on the amount of building frontage and surface lot that they would be having. The applicant will be required to provide a preliminary landscaping plan to meet the full code requirements during their final development plan and building permit review stages. Looking at performance standards of items such as external noise and lighting and that type of thing, we would look to apply the same performance standards of the surrounding D commercial district to these properties, and reminding the Plan Commission and public that the renderings provided by the applicant are simply conceptual at this point. Any final architectural renderings would have to go to the Architectural Review Board. And then also looking at if there's any conflicts with historic preservation at this site. 34 North Gore Avenue is located within the Old Webster Historic Districts. The applicant isn't proposing to make any changes to that building at this time. If in the future any sort of significant demolition was proposed, it would have to go through the Historic Preservation Commission in public hearings, but that the existing bank teller canopy structure does not have any kind of historic status for review during its demolition. Before going into the detailed ordinance recommendations, can I or Mara answer any questions?
I noticed that they said they're going to open the ATM in 10 months.
Charlie,
I think you need to do.
into the microphone. It's not picking up.
So I noticed that they said they were going to open up an ATM in 10 months,
Alright.
and they have to file a final development plan. Do I need to start again?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. So their proposal says they're going to open up the ATM in 10 months. And the final development plan is due in 1 year, is that right?
Correct. They would be required to do the final development plan to show their first phase of development before they could open up or start any work on a new ATM.
All right, so if I heard you correctly, they have to do the final development plan before they open up the ATM?
Correct.
Is that right? And then what happens if they don't build the building?
Can I take that?
So there is a requirement that they have to do what is in the ordinance for the rest of the property. There isn't a time frame for when construction has to begin, but they would still be allowed to do any of the uses that are in that list. So there is not a particular time frame other than getting the final development plan approved. I know a lot of you were waiting anxiously for the second building to be built in our other PC district on Lockwood. And as you can see, the construction has finally begun on that. So there is no particular timing, but the zoning would stay in place if a final development plan has been approved. And the final development plan could come back to you with additional changes as long as it meets everything that was in the zoning that you approve.
Just a question about the parking. So the parking spaces that are dedicated for the offsite parking that's going to be allowed for the 75 West Lockwood, are those going to be preserved through a parking agreement should they change ownership or something like that? Is there going to be some sort of agreement to preserve those spaces?
So I'm sure we could put in the ordinance that should the property be disengaged from one another and not under the same ownership, we could add that into the ordinance so that it requires that it is covering the parking for all of those locations.
Do the properties have to be contiguous to be in a PC?
The two properties that are being rezoned are contiguous with one another.
No, do properties have to be contiguous to be in a PC?
I don't think there's anything in our code that requires them to be contiguous. We've always assumed that when you rezone a property that you do have them as a contiguous area. But no, technically, I don't think you would have to. But it would be a little odd.
So the property at Gore and Lockwood could be part of this development, but it's not. Is that right?
Correct. We could have put that into the rezoning. I think in talking with the owner of the property, it didn't necessarily need to come into it because what we were doing was they were asking for an accessory parking use for parking that was across the street. So no, we didn't integrate it. If you wanted to do that, we would have to go back and re-advertise because we did not advertise that address and that locator ID as being a part of this rezoning.
Can the city insist on that, or is it the developer, the owner, who gets to decide that?
Well, I mean, it's his property, so he has to decide whether he wants to
So he
apply.
gets to decide whether
He
we would
applies to
include that or
rezone.
not.
Yeah, he would. I mean, again, we could make some requirement for that. I'm not sure it would be in terms of the zoning necessarily appropriate. The D commercial district already has everything that is needed for it to remain as it is with all the tenants that are in there now and the mix of tenants that they've had in the past. So
Well, to Tony's point, if he sold that property at Gore and Lockwood, and that property includes those 14 spots, is that right?
Mhm.
Then would that new owner have to comply with some kind of parking, make some kind of?
only if we put it in there as a requirement of the rezoning of this particular property. Because the D commercial district is made in such a way that unless you add square footage to your structure, you're not required to have to come into compliance for the parking. It's a shared parking in the district. So if they never expand the 75 West Moody, they would never have to add any additional parking unless they add square footage to the structure. The structure as it sits today with those 14 parking spaces is actually the bare minimum. We do not have to require anything else new to come in at this time. But because the owner knows that this will help with the tenants, that's why the accessory parking use is being recommended and proposed as being shared in the parking lot at 55 West Moody.
So can we come up with some language to include in the proposed ordinance?
I can think about that while you ask the rest of your questions.
Okay.
I mean, that is something that we did with one of our other projects that we're going to be looking at with the final development plan tonight. Over in Old Orchard, we did require shared parking lease agreements as part of the rezoning ordinance. That could be something we could look at that language. To be honest with you, there were so many recommendations. I don't remember if it's in there on this one, but we could look at that to add similar language to this one.
Kind of like Olive and Oak,
Yeah.
they had to have a
Right.
parking agreement.
To answer Charlie's reliable life, they had building across the street and it all became planned commercial.
Yeah.
Just so you know, it doesn't have to be contiguous.
I got a litany of questions
Go for
Go
it.
for it.
some of which are inconsequential, but this, I guess this is just a general question. Where buildings are not built to a 0 lot line, it requires 5 foot is required, right? So it's either 0 or 5. It's 1, 2, 3, 4 that are not.
Yeah, the 1, 2, 3, 4 is not allowed because then you can't physically maintain a building. Yeah, so if you're going to have some sort of space,
There has to be.
it has to be at least 5 feet.
And we want a front building line no greater than or less than 10 feet. So 10 feet.
Yes, the hard part is we normally put it in as a setback, and you can then go even further. You don't have to meet it. And then some other form-based codes put it as a build to line, and you can't go any. So it was a little bit, we were trying to really, this is unusual for us to put in a very specific, if you're going to do something, you need to be in this location. We don't normally put a very specific number of you must be at this number.
Okay, but that's what we're doing.
That's what we were doing on this one.
So the preliminary plan is 17 living units and 5,000 square feet. And the staff recommendation is no more than 5,000 square feet. Is there a reason for limiting to 5,000 square feet other than that's what the applicant has requested?
So the limit of 5,000 square feet was to maintain a similar parking impact as what would be if you had 17 units. So if you were reducing by 2 units for every 1,000 square feet added, the way the parking standards come out is that it would be an equivalent, a basically equivalent number of parking spaces needed.
Wouldn't fit on the property.
I'm sorry, what?
The required amount of parking spaces wouldn't fit on the property.
Well, it would have the same amount of parking spaces as that, equivalent number, amount of development, I guess. That 5,000 square feet of commercial would be similar to, I think it was 6 residential units or something along those lines.
As I understood their proposal, they were saying 17 units. And then they sometime later said we might want to put in commercial.
Correct.
That is correct.
In conversation we had with them.
So, yeah, so I mean, there's nothing that's going to require them to put in any.
No. But we wanted to give them the option because, if you were in a standard D commercial district, you can have first floor commercial and residential units above. But we still wanted to, carefully look at how it would impact parking with this new development if they incorporated commercial and residential together.
Existing building stays commercial, the 33.
The 34 North Gore is staying
But then
commercial.
BC, there's gonna be commercial.
Yes.
So we're not really trying to encourage commercial or not. It's more just from a parking standpoint.
Yeah, it's giving them some flexibility to do commercial and residential together. But with the parking, numbers that they provided, parking spaces that they're saying that they would provide, it would maintain a similar parking ratio.
I guess personally, I would like to encourage commercial along with the residential, but. Okay, and then 5,000 square feet, how many business, I mean, I know it's going to vary, but I mean, how many businesses would that support? 3?
Yeah, I mean, it would depend. I think I was kind of looking at it when I was trying to figure out what could be workable. I think the Bread Co. that's in Old Webster is between 5,000 and 6,000 square feet. They're single, restaurant. So it would be something along that size of space.
Just know when you approved the bank and the commercial building that's next to the bank that's under construction right now, you all put in that it was a minimum of 3,400 square feet. And I know there's the bank and then there's 2 tenants going in to the other space. It's an office user and a coffee shop.
Other questions? Go
I'll
ahead.
be quiet now.
No.
What? I'm sorry, silly question. I'm confused. You got the building on the right on that site plan, got the solid black line around it.
Uh-huh.
Then there's another black line around the building.
Yeah, I think that's
What is that second
identifying
black line?
landscaping. I think that's just a landscaping area around the building.
That's the landscaping area, but your entry, the entry is they're just the one entry to the left of the new building and to this lot. They're just the one entry.
Correct. And this,
So
yeah,
that black line goes into that entry.
yeah, I mean, this is, and again, we were looking at it, we had some questions about how, turning radius and getting into any kind of structured parking, if that could really work as they've presented it, and we weren't sure. But we did, we told them and we recognize this is just a very conceptual rendering. Anything going any further beyond this, it would have to get more specific.
I got you, but we really don't know what that second black line is. And I guess where I'm heading, that entry is gonna be the only entry. Let me finish. I'm just wondering if I'm correct.
Sure.
So it's gonna have the in, the out for the ATM, and then another 8 feet for the emergency vehicles. So that entry is gonna be 12, 24, 36, 44 feet wide.
Right, the curb cut would have to come into no wider than 24 feet at the right of way. So they will have to modify, this preliminary plan to meet, to meet access and circulation requirements.
But in essence, you're looking at, like I said, the in, the out, the ATM, and your extra 8 foot.
Yeah,
All right, thank you.
sure.
Okay, anybody else? Recommendations?
And
No, it's staff recommendations.
I mean, and I guess I'm sorry. That was my problem. I guess I was still thinking about this. There isn't anything necessarily set in this ordinance that says they couldn't do a second curb cut on the other side of the building to add an additional drive lane or something. To be honest, I do think they probably will have to modify this site plan to get, closer to what they want to do. But
I mean, this is tight on the parking already.
sure,
It's the other thing I was going with the black line. They're gonna have to have their dumpsters and everything
Sure.
accessible.
so
too.
the
Should that
so
be
the
something
footprint
we
of the building
require
will
to show?
probably have to change. May not be able to be that large in order to accomplish what they said they're going to build.
So just as a reminder, this is a preliminary development plan. So what it does is it helps us to figure out and establish setbacks, height, anything special that we want to go that's not already in the code.
Sure.
So if the code already has access management standards, they will have to meet all those access management standards unless they had asked us to do something different. So we're not limiting them to 1 curb cut or 2 curb cuts. There are a lot of things that we are continuing to just say, it's going to meet the code. So as long as it meets the code, if they were coming in for this structure today and we're not integrating the ATM or the accessory parking lot by having additional parking that's shared between the 2 properties, they would not even be coming before you because they would just be building with a site development plan. They'd be able to build a mixed-use building on that property because that's already allowed in the D district. They'd be allowed to build to the height. They'd be allowed to build to the various setbacks. So they'd just be following the code. But by integrating and trying to bring together the additional parking to ensure that there is parking in the district, to integrate what had been there for almost 50 years, an ATM. In order to do that, that is why they're coming before you for a planned commercial district. So hopefully that helps a little bit in the preliminary nature. It's for you to establish regulations for what they can and cannot do in order for them to provide these 2 elements that normally would require a separate process. The accessory parking requires a CUP. The ATM is not allowed in the D district unless it's part of a PC planned commercial.
I understand. I just sure like to know what that second black line is.
Okay, well, I'll go into the recommendations, briefly. Staff would recommend approval of the application for the rezoning and preliminary development plan. Should the plan commission wish to forward the request to the city council with a recommendation of approval, staff would recommend certain conditions to be placed on the request for change of zoning, including limiting the various uses that could be allowed, including no more than 17 dwelling units. no more than 5,000 square feet of commercial of these uses at 55 West Moody, which would be limited to the first story and would need to be met with a reduction of residential units. That the performance standards of the D district would be met, that they would not exceed a floor area ratio of 1, including that the structured parking, any structured parking added would not be included into the gross floor area calculation. That there would not be a site coverage within the district exceeding 40%. The height shall not exceed 4 stories or be less than 2 stories. That there would be a maximum parking reduction of up to 20% from the code requirements, that they would incorporate a minimum of 8 bicycle parking spaces. There would be a minimum of 2 queuing spaces within the drive-through ATM station line, and allowing for a minimum 8-foot wide emergency exit lane along the ATM queue. That they would follow the D commercial district setbacks, except for allowing a front building line of no greater than or less than 15 feet if they're going to be adding functional front balconies. And that would be reduced to 10 feet if they are not incorporating functional front balconies. And that would be to ensure they have adequate space for planting trees on the street. That they would follow the standard retaining wall height and setback regulations, that they would follow the standard sign code regulations, that they would submit a lighting plan to meet the standard code regulations, that they would provide opportunities for recycling within the development. The fire department provided a number of comments ensuring that the development would meet the basic fire code standards for new development. The public works department had wanted to require that they would meet all city standards for sidewalks and curb cuts. They would add a new 6-inch barrier curb along the street curb along West Moody Avenue. That they would only provide any on-street parking spaces at the discretion of the Public Works Department. That they would provide a final landscaping plan in the final development plan and building permit processes, and that they would provide adequate screening around mechanical equipment and dumpsters. Is there any other questions from the commission?
Thanks.
If the applicant is on, it would be, I believe it would be Maury Cole. Don't know.
So the applicant's here by Zoom? Is that
It looks like they're actually not. They're not here to answer any questions.
I'm going to send a quick email to see if something happened. If you wanted to talk through, I think I had drafted something up if you were interested in doing the parking.
Yeah.
So hold on just a second.
And, to be honest, we do typically send a reminder email out to all the applicants beforehand. Things have been so crazy lately. I did not send a reminder email to them. So, they were aware of the meeting date and to attend tonight, but I don't believe they got an additional reminder email.
Okay, I'm just going to send.
He's clearly very on top of it with this, all how organized this is.
Okay, so my recommendation is that under item 9, which is related to parking, Danny, can you move back to 9? So we have parking for permitted use shall be calculated per that code. We could add an additional, should the parking at 75 West Lockwood be moved to separate ownership, a shared parking agreement for parking at 55 West Moody shall be required. Does that cover what you were thinking?
Yes, I just wanted to make sure that there was that preservation for them.
Yeah.
That's good. All right, so there's nobody here for the applicant. Are there any members of the public who want to make comments?
That member of the public out there is my son Peter, who's also my partner.
Well, we're
Just
not gonna let him
coincidentally,
make
we have
any
the same
comments,
last
are we?
name. Pardon me?
We're not gonna let him make any comments, sorry.
I believe there might be someone on Zoom who would like to speak. So if there's anyone who would like to speak for the public hearing, you can raise your hand on Zoom. Okay,
All right, is there a motion to close the public hearing?
So moved.
Second.
Been moved and seconded to close the public hearing on 21 PC 0855 West Moody. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Is there anyone opposed? Next item.
Twenty-one PC 09 City Code Text Amendments, Tree Preservation and Landscape Ordinance. Proposed amendments include creating a new chapter 57 tree preservation and landscape requirements through the relocation and amendment of regulations in chapter 10 Public Ways and Places, sections 10.300 through 10.385.
so thank you, everyone. I know you spent a lot of time on some of our more recent items, and so we had a free moment and we added another text code amendment because I know you're so excited to be amending our ordinances. This time, this is actually a code amendment that we've been working on for years. We just, every time we go to put it on the agenda, something more important has come forward. So we're really hoping to be able to address this. It's a collaborative effort between the Parks Department, as well as the Public Works Department and Planning. I'm going to give you a quick history of what happened with the tree and landscape ordinance over the years. In 2004, 8389 was approved by the City Council, and that ordinance was done in such a way to try to help understand or let people understand how to take care of and maintain their existing trees, as well as how to properly maintain street trees that were under the in the public right of way, and to make sure that they would have that ability to help these trees to continue to grow and to stay in good condition, and to promote again the participation of residents in continuing to keep our a tree city. After they had approved that in 2004, a number of years passed, and they started to realize that there were actually quite a few things that they weren't addressing. So in 2011, after, from what I understand, was many meetings, including a subcommittee of City Council, they came up with a tree and landscape ordinance. In this case, they tried to integrate things on private property and within development areas, not just care and maintenance of right-of-way trees. So the ordinance 8719 was approved in 2011, integrating and expanding how to take care of or preserve trees, as well as what kind of trees and landscaping would be required for new development. One of the things that we have learned over the time in the last 10 years of using this ordinance is that the ordinance really, because of how it had its origins within the public works section of the code, it's all in the wrong place. I should say not all of it, but most of it is in the wrong place. So when a developer comes to the city and says, what should I be doing? And we're directing them to public ways and places, we're directing them to probably more the wrong section of the code. We should be directing them to something that is a tree and landscape ordinance that is more closely tied to our zoning ordinance and our sign ordinance and our architecture review board. So what we have proposed, and again, I think this is in concert with what Public Works is really thinking is quite important, is we have moved over, we're going to separate this into two sections. The first section that you can see here is these items identified in yellow. These are code sections that are about public ways and places. Some of them overlap with one another, but they are about maintaining street trees, helping to confirm that residents don't take down trees within the public right of way, trying to maintain site distance, all of those things that are important and should be within public ways and places. And that is a code section that legally does not need to have a public hearing either before you or the council. So it can kind of go on a separate track from what we are proposing to be working on with you as the Plan Commission. As the Plan Commission, this overlap of green, these are items that we need to, if we're going to create a Chapter 57 for planning and development, for development of private tree protection and development of landscaping on private property, we need to make that its own section that would tie directly back into our various ordinances that typically developers or contractors look at in the tree code. So what we're proposing to do is that we will start and hold a series of public hearings with you to discuss the options of how to move forward with this part of the tree ordinance. When you get a recommendation eventually to go to City Council, the second tract of that other piece in Chapter 10 is going to come to council at the same time. So then that way they can integrate, and we won't be instituting one versus the other or having any code section not be applicable. They would then go simultaneously to City Council and they could approve both of those in concert, so that we would still have protection for trees in the public right of way. And then now a code section that's a little bit easier to understand within the development. So a couple key things, what we were hoping to do tonight is tell you a little bit about the history and then talk to you about some of the key sections that we are going to be looking at and why we're going to be looking at them. Then what we would propose is that you hold the hearing open to next month's meeting. At that point in time, we're going to expand on each of those sections so that we can kind of delve into them, similar to what we did for the parking ordinance and similar to what we did for the Airbnb short-term rental ordinance. So we can kind of flush out some of the questions and concerns with feedback from Public Works and Parks and Planning. And then from there, we could maybe move to a red line draft for the January Plan Commission meeting with the option that if you've had enough information, you could vote at that time. And then you could move it on to the City Council. So a couple of the key sections that are important to us that I want to sort of point out so that in your packet, you have a copy of the current ordinance. And I think it'd be important for you to be able to understand what we're thinking about looking at. So under definitions, it's actually interesting. Some of the definitions have the regulations integrated into them. So the regulations aren't actually in the code. They're only in the definitions, which makes it really difficult when you try to explain to someone why you're upholding something in the ordinance when it's not technically in the ordinance, it's in the definition. We also have a few words that are not defined in the code. And so keeping those, making sure that we put a couple of those in there to help clarify what they mean. And then some updates on how we're actually putting the code in practice. So some of those definitions might not be fleshed out with how we've been operating for the last 10 plus years using the code. Licensing and registration. Right now, there is a licensing portion, but there's nothing that relates to registration. So we want to update our licensing requirements to match all other licensing requirements within the city of Webster Groves. There are licensing requirements in other code sections. We also need to add, we do already do a registration for our tree specialists who are they're arborists that are able to do tree preservation plans, but the licensing isn't actually listed in the code. Under the tree preservation section, we want to move some of the requirements from the definition section and flush those out, make sure that those are properly in the code in an easy manner for someone to find. There aren't really application requirements. Sometimes it doesn't exactly say, turn in an application, provide, this information when you apply for a tree preservation permit or when you apply for a landscape plan. We want to clarify the applicability. Many times people question why they have to apply for a particular type of permit. And it's been through interpretations over the years as to how they need to apply. And we need to make sure to make it really clear, just make it easier for people to understand. We also give waivers for tree preservation permits, but technically there's no waiver in the ordinance. We do many times find that a waiver is necessary when someone is new to a particular property. They're planning on protecting all the trees. We wouldn't necessarily make them go through a full tree preservation permit when all they're doing is they're a new homeowner that just moved in and wants to do some work on their property and will be protecting trees and don't plan to tear anything down. So that waiver and making sure that that waiver is identified in the code would be important. Clarifying tree replacement regulations. There's a lot of questions as to how they overlap with one another. When you are saving certain trees, they can count as a street tree. Or if you're putting in trees for a parking lot, they can double count as replacement trees when you've taken other trees down. So making sure that's all clarified. It's a way we've been acting as a policy for the last 10 years, but it isn't necessarily specified in the code. Under landscape plan, we get very few landscape plans because they're only for really brand new developments or something that's a very large addition to a parking lot. So we do want to clarify when it's applicable and update the plan content section to make sure someone understands what we would need. Under the landscape design standards, we'd like to organize the section a little bit better for clarity. There's a few sections. We'd like to make something that's more general regulations in one place instead of having it in 3 or 4 different places. We'd also like to clarify the updated requirements that overlap with preserved landscaping and then existing trees. Clarify buffering requirements. There's been some questions on when buffering requirements are applicable. It talks about the zoning of something next door versus how it actually is operating next door. So there are many places where in the C district you have a single family home and it doesn't require buffering to that single family home because it's already zone C. We've had a few oddities with that would be important to clarify. And then there is a disapproval section, but there's nothing in there that really explains how to appeal a problem or a question within the code. And the last thing is our sureties. We have an issue with some discrepancies between fines and what's in place. So it's my understanding this was the 2011 requirements. When they were put in place, there was a change at the last minute that changed the amount that would be the maximum amount that someone on a residential piece of property would put down as a deposit. However, that amount doesn't match the fine amount that we can fine someone. It's lower. So there wasn't a matchup between those. And so there's a concern that we're holding a deposit, but we can't actually fine them for the amount that was in the code that's beyond what the deposit holds. So clearing those up, trying to clarify when those are able to be released. Many times people have confusion over if they've built a piece of property and it hasn't been occupied right away. The code says that you don't start counting the amount of time that we hold the tree preservation surety until someone's occupied the property. We'd like to have some options where if the construction is complete, everything's been cleaned up and all the trees are still in good condition, we could start the time clock then and not have to wait until it's actually occupied with an occupancy permit. So those are some of the last sort of most important ones. The last the last couple things that we wanted to do besides removing is, did I already do this slide? Do I have this slide in here twice? Appeals, adding an appeals section and clarifying prohibited acts. Some of the prohibited acts have been, again, interpreted over the years on how they apply and making sure it's very clear in the code so that no one has any discrepancies with that. So we would request that you keep the hearing open. If any of you were able to read through some of the code sections and had any particular questions about things that you would like us to give you additional information on, we're more than happy to do additional research on, how many landscape plans we've done so far, or what the tree surety typically is, or any of that other additional information. Doesn't have to be this evening that you tell us. You can let us know between now and the next meeting. And a lot of this is going to be literally just cleaning a few things up. There's not any really big moves that I feel like we're making, but trying to make sure it's as clean and concise as possible and in the proper section of the city code.
We keep bad trees out.
What trees out?
Bad trees. So there is a section in the code that says what types of trees you're supposed to plant when you are planting for a new development. And Yvonne really stays on top of that. She makes sure that not only do they not put trees in place that are, poor species that should not be planted, she also does that for bushes and for grasses and for other things that could cause additional invasive and could cause additional problems. And so we've kept that code section a little bit more open because it is ever changing. You know, at one point in time, everyone thought Bradford pears were the best tree you would have ever thought of. No one really understood that that was a problem. So we are trying to keep that open. We've made most of our references to whatever is on the state of Missouri's site, some of their pages on hazardous species, things that are noxious plants, things that should not be planted. But yes, we can pull that for you and show you where that list of acceptable street trees is and things like that.
So you're basically gonna, will it clarify the difference between commercial development and residential development? Is that kind of what you're doing?
Yes, yeah, it's already in there, but I think there's a few things that we want to clarify on, making sure that people understand that landscape plans are for commercial developments. We don't need a landscape plan for a single family home. The only thing they need to provide is if they don't have an existing street tree, provide a street tree. So some of those things which seem so basic and standard confuse people when they look at our code. It's just not as clear. So yes, we hope to clarify a lot of that.
And that'll all be in this one section.
Yes, all of that for private development will be in this one section.
Mhm.
We will, just so that you can see it, we will probably provide you with a red line just for informational purposes only of what we're proposing for the public ways and places section,
Mhm.
but it doesn't go through you. It's not something that, you know, again, needs to go before Planning Commission, but we'll probably provide it just as background information so you can see what we're going to duplicate in both of them, like appeals section and the fines section. If you do certain things, make sure that those are clear and concise and similar in both
This
sections.
is strictly development, not.
This one is strictly for development. Correct.
Yeah, cool. All right.
Any other questions?
Anybody else? Is there a motion to hold the public hearing open on, what is this, 21 PC09 to December 13th, I think? Is that right? I'm going to keep it open.
Second.
Been moved and seconded to hold the public hearing open on 21 PC09 to the meeting of December 13th. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Is there anyone opposed? All right, is there a motion to move into executive session?
So you should have
We have another
a,
one?
Oh, we have something else?
yep, you should have a site, a final development plan.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought that
We
was
do?
an executive session. I'm sorry.
All right, next item, 21 PC 10, Pacific Place Final Development Plan, an application by Webster Group 1, LP and MS Partners LLC for approval of a final development plan for a property zone PC Planned Commercial District on an approximately 1.25 acre tract of land located at 37, 41, and 45 South Old Orchard Avenue.
Just a point of clarification, if
see
there's
this?
no public hearing on this, why is it in the public hearing section?
It's not, it's in the plats and site plan section.
All right.
Didn't we see this before?
You have, so just to clarify, just as a reminder, which this was a question that you all had before, when you have a PC planned commercial district, you're required to approve a final development plan within 12 months. Well, in the middle of COVID, we did this rezoning. We have not come back to do a final development plan for him. He needs to make sure that just by the letter of the law, he has approved a final development plan, even though the development's pretty much built out. We were cleaning things up for future development. He's not developing anything at this time, but does need to have this approved within 1 year. And 1 year is technically this week.
Remember they added the courtyard area and all
Yeah,
that kind
I
of stuff?
remember.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll go through this really quickly. Again, this was a PC Plan Commercial District that was approved in November 2020. They're required to come back to the Plan Commission with their final development plan that would meet all of the requirements that you recommended and the City Council approved in the rezoning ordinance. In the surrounding area, they are located near the Old Orchard Shopping Center with various restaurants, parking, retail. They're located near the railroad and Interstate 44, adjacent to Narings High School and the limited multifamily development available for the repertory theater. There are existing conditions that the existing property has a 2 or 3 story multifamily housing, a single story retail along the curve in Old Orchard Avenue. Again, to explain, they are required to come back within 12 months from the PC Plain Commercial District Ordinance. And this is within 1 week of 1 year timeframe from when their ordinance was approved. The general site layout, setbacks, and building height are consistent with the requirements that were approved in ordinance 9135. Various setbacks, very complicated setbacks were tied to the lot description and meets and bounds of the property that the applicant will be meeting with their development. That the applicant will be meeting a maximum 3-story building height and will not be exceeding 36% lot coverage or floor area ratio of 1.0. The ordinance did require a minimum of 49 off-street parking spaces to be established on site or through shared parking agreements. This subject property still has 37 off-street parking spaces, and they utilize shared parking easement agreements to utilize 12 parking spaces in the shopping center parking lot. So the proposed parking development plan is consistent with what was required in the ordinance. The ordinance also stated that should they expand, there would be a 0.75 parking ratio for every senior dwelling unit they added, and that there would be a minimum of 1 parking space for every 300 square feet of commercial. Should they add this, staff would reevaluate to make sure that they're meeting these parking code requirements. There would be no change to the access and circulation within the site. It remains consistent with the requirements in the ordinance and within the Chapter 10 city code regulations, and that the renderings still would be required to go through the ARB review. Their conceptual renderings they provided remain consistent with the requirements in the ordinance. Staff recommends approval of the final development plan. Is there any questions that Mara or I could address?
I do have one question, since this is very technical. The technicalities seem to be important here, maybe not. In reading the minutes, 47 Old Orchard is not mentioned when I read the minutes, but it appears to be part of the plan. I need to. Or read the agenda.
The
rather.
agenda, you mean?
Oh, we did 37, 41, 45.
It says 45-47.
I think 45 and 47 are the same.
They are, I
Property.
apologize. They are the same. The legal one, in St. Louis County, the legal is 45. And then I believe 47 is just another address on that same piece of property.
So what you can do is amend the minutes by interlineation just to correct them in order to make sure that they are consistent with what you have in front of you.
And since we didn't need to advertise it because it's just an item on your agenda, we are okay. This wasn't something that we needed to advertise, but thank you for pointing that out.
But if you amend your agenda, you've cured it.
Okay, so
You would move to amend the agenda to include the number 47.
Okay.
And then that needs a second and a vote.
I move to amend 21 PC 10 to include 47 South Old Orchard Avenue.
Second, perfect.
Moved and seconded to include 47
Aye.
South Old Orchard Avenue in the agenda item for 21 PC 10. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Is there anyone opposed?
Hmm.
All right. Now, can we get a motion to move into executive session?
So moved.
Now, it says, now can we get emotionally? Sorry.
I think there was a second. It's been moved and seconded to move
Yes.
into executive session. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All right, is there anyone opposed? Hear anybody? So It's the first and only item on the agenda in executive session.
21 PC 08 55 West Moody, an application by Sunshine Peak LLC for change of zoning from D Commercial District to PC Plan Commercial District on an approximately 1.3 acre tract of land located at the following addresses: 55 West Moody Avenue and 34 North Gore Avenue.
Discussion.
Do we have any idea why the applicant didn't bother to show up?
Well,
The Morgan
he
email
could have
said it was a
forgotten. It could be an
miscommunication.
emergency. He could not care.
Sounds like a miscommunication. maybe.
I'm sure it was, I mean, without us even asking, he dropped off the packet information. He's been checking in with us multiple times. There has to, and I did try emailing him and I didn't see anything. So, I mean, if you all feel that you have additional questions that were not able to be answered, you can hold it if you want.
Well, then we'd have to put it back on the public hearing, right? We'd have
Yeah,
to move
'cause-
it back to public hearing.
Mhm.
Does anybody have any questions they want to ask the applicant that they want to do that?
No.
No, I was just curious.
It's very thorough.
All right, so let's go on with our discussion of this.
I guess I'll start. I don't have a lot of discussion. It seems like it's the only real change from what existing zoning would allow is the ATM. I don't see this as real complicated. I would be ready to approve it. We don't.
And the accessory parking. Those are the two. Otherwise, they can do whatever they wanted already. in the
Right.
D district.
Right.
I think it's reasonable. And if he was here, I would say, well done.
That's short and succinct, I think.
So-
So we have a motion?
Before you get to that, one thing that Danny wanted to point out in clarifying the potential shared agreement is that the way we did write number 9 was parking for each permitted use shall be calculated per the code with the maximum 20%. One thing we didn't identify is because all the uses are within the PC district, we didn't say including the parking for the accessory structure. Or the accessory parking lot structure. So we didn't really integrate the 75 West Moody into that in the way we wrote it. Because technically 75 West Lockwood, 75 West Lockwood is not a part of the rezoning. So with it not being a part of the rezoning, we probably want to clarify number 9. Parking for each permitted use, including uses at 75 West Lockwood, shall be calculated per, and it would continue. And then it would include the other recommendation of, should the property at 75 West Lockwood be moved to separate ownership, a shared parking agreement for parking at 55 West Moody shall be required. Does that make sense?
It does. So we have to make a motion to add that to the conditions.
Yes, so if you wanted to move forward with that, that would be staff's recommendation to make those changes to really clarify both that it's covering the accessory parking in the calculations that we ran, so that that maximum 20% includes that, as well as the idea that we are ensuring that there is some sort of shared parking agreement should these properties be split and no longer under common ownership.
So the shared parking agreement would have to contain what? Doesn't it have to say it's consistent with what we have now?
Well, so we were saying the shared parking agreement would be that it's still meeting all the other uses. So the first sentence clarifies that you need to meet all the uses. The second sentence is clarifying that should that be separated, that it needs to have a shared parking agreement.
That is consistent with the first sentence.
That would integrate the rest of it into it. So whatever that shared parking agreement is, they can't get greater rights than what you
It's
have
got to,
already.
yeah, so I think otherwise they can just do any agreement they want, right?
Mhm. Yes,
So can we put that wording in there?
yes, sorry, my brain is not yet.
You know, mine's not working too well either. Don't worry about it.
Should the property at 75 West Lockwood be moved to separate ownership, a shared parking permit for parking shall be required to address it should be to address all uses as listed above.
Or contemplated in this ordinance.
Yeah, all uses.
You want to hear that to me? I'll make the motion, Lauren.
Yeah. Completed.
I'm just worried about if they sell it, you know. and they're
Yeah,
out-
so
then
you
they're
can
out
read
of
that.
their- yeah,
It's a
then,
mess.
you know, if They sell
I'll
the
move to
apartments to
approve.
somebody and then they're screwed.
Hey, Maury is now on Zoom. If you wanted to ask him any questions.
I want to just go ahead.
Yeah,
Let's just go ahead.
Right, because you'd have to reopen. It's-
Yeah, I don't want to reopen the hearing. Does anybody want to do that?
No,
No,
because we're all.
I'm
I
gonna
still
do
don't
it,
even
so
see him on there.
ask.
But you
I
can't-
don't-
I think we're going to approve this anyway. so-
Yeah.
That's fine. That's fine. But if you had any other questions, I have him.
we don't.
Okay.
Scott is going to make a motion. I'm excited.
I'll go ahead and move to approve 21 PC08 with the edits of staff recommendation number 9 to state that should the property at 75 West Lockwood be shared parking, should the property at 75 West Lockwood be moved to additional ownership, to different ownership, a shared parking agreement for parking at 55 Moody shall be required to address all uses as contemplated in this ordinance.
All right.
I'll second.
It's good. You've got it.
All right, it's been moved and seconded to approve PC, what's the number on this one? Somebody help me here.
21 PC08.
21 PC 08, so as amended, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Is there anyone opposed? Can we do a voice vote, please?
Roll.
Let's just go down, state your name and
Scott Mueller, aye.
Steve Hunkins, aye.
Jeff Smith, aye.
Annie Tierney, aye.
Maddie Heikela, aye.
Tony Hunt, aye.
Mike Butcher, aye.
and I'm, Charles Sindel, aye.
Want me to write that down for you, Charlie?
Yeah, I didn't write my name down on this. All right, so that's passed.
It says Charles Cinderella.
Cinderella, like that. Okay, other business?
Any other business?
Other business?
Oh, sorry, I'm still texting, I'm emailing with Maury. He's like, I'm 2 minutes away. I can run over. So
Oh,
no,
he's
he's
cute.
fine. I'm gonna tell him he's fine. I don't think I have any other business at this time. We'll continue to move forward with the tree ordinance for the next month.
Okay.
We believe that we may have a planned environment unit coming to you for the next meeting.
What? What's a
I-
planned environment unit?
So in our zoning ordinance, and it's only been used once in the city, you can do what's called a planned environment unit where you overlay to the underlying residential zoning a plan that integrates more clustered housing and potentially saves some other areas around it. And so we are, I believe that they're going to be turning it in. I don't think we will have it necessarily for December. It might be for the January meeting.
Interesting.
I think they weren't going to be able to get it in by this week in order to be on for December. So again, probably for January. There's also potentially another rezoning that might be coming forward for another mixed use. So I've got a couple, bless you, big ones coming up in the next few. So just
Exciting.
be aware and be available as best you can. And I thank you, everybody who was able to come in person. I feel like it just goes so much faster when you're all here. And we'll continue to be as safe as possible and continue to follow whatever regulations county says in regards to masks indoors and hopefully be able to keep moving forward.
So when I go home tonight, my wife's gonna say, what's going on with Union Bagels?
They are just going really slow.
Yeah.
They are going
Still
really
there,
slow.
huh?
It is still there. It is still coming. What? Yeah, I mean, I think I've heard that about a lot. Union Bagel's still under construction. Amy's Cake Pop Shop is expanding to a second portion of the space. We've got Betty's Book, which had their opening.
I went, it's awesome.
Very
I've been like
cool.
3 or 4
Um,
times.
And
It's
thank
good.
you for all your help with
Oh,
that.
thanks.
Yeah, that is-
They have been so appreciative of all your help
Oh,
getting
good.
that done. Yeah.
I'm glad.
I guess I'm the agenda police tonight, but
Yeah.
other business was listed discussion of additional August. September. I assume that was
so-
cut and paste from-
We were, there should have been an updated agenda that took it off. The one that's printed is probably the wrong one, but we did update the agenda to take that off. That was,
Also, the play days, did they find another location?
not another location that has, no, not within the city.
Oh, okay.
I want to mark Jeff as an exhibit for proof that rather than just a rubber stamp that doesn't read anything, that just approves it, you're reading these things.
Thank you for reading it.
Are we adjourned?
I think we are, you'll have gotten an email. We're not going to have our same normal holiday boards and commissions party, but you'll be getting something about some pared down version.
The city clerk will be informing you all this Friday, December 17th at the rec center. There'll be a dessert and reception gathering with lots of space. You can come as you feel comfortable to help for the city celebrating you and thanking you over the holiday season for your time and service.
And for those, we didn't even introduce Eric. For those who hadn't met Eric yet, Eric Peterson, Assistant City Manager, came to help with our new Zoom, which has new cameras and everything. That this is the absolute first time it's being used.
Awesome.
Yep.
It's very nice to meet you.
Yeah. Nice to meet you.
Is there a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
All in favor?
These are fun.
Aye.
Yeah.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank
you,
you.
Charlie.
And nice to meet you.
Short and sweet.